Someone asked me if I could do a short demonstration of how to use this Connecting Scriptures Bible that I recommended the other day on the preachers group. So I want to walk you through a verse in this Bible. I'm looking at Luke chapter 22 and verse number 20. And let me read that for you. In the same way, he also took the cup after supper and said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." Now, you'll notice if there's one complaint I've got, I wish they would have made this a little bit brighter green, make those letters pop a little bit more. But it is what it is. But the two phrases that are in a different color here, the new covenant in my blood and poured out for you. And if you look at the end of both phrases, there's a footnote. This one has B, and then this one has an A and then a C. The A is for a textual note down here, and that's not really what we're concerned about. What we're concerned about with this one is the C. So the B and the C. Now notice the color. Okay, so when you go over here, you'll see that same color in the references. So the first phrase was new covenant in my blood. And if you come over here, you'll see they have a reference to Exodus 24:8, Jeremiah 31, which is the new covenant text in Jeremiah. Oh, let me say something about this Exodus 24:8 text. That is where God ratifies the old covenant with Israel at Sinai, and it was ratified through blood sacrifice, okay? And then there's a reference here in Zechariah 9:11 to the blood of the covenant. So those are cross-references that the editors of this Bible suggest we consider as Old Testament allusions, not with an I, but with an A, right? Allusions. Then, oh, by the way, they have a really good footnote for this down here where they discuss Jesus' description of the sacramental nature of the cup. The cup is the new covenant in my blood, poured out for you. And it even deals with the fact that it alludes to two important passages in the Old Testament. And the first one is first one dealing with pouring out blood, draws the reader back to Exodus 24:8, where Moses descends on Mount Sinai, takes the blood of an offering, sprinkles it on the people, and declares, "This is the blood of the covenant." By this sacramental act, the old covenant at Sinai is inaugurated in blood with the people. And then second, the new covenant phrasing invites the reader to leap forward several centuries to Jeremiah 31, where God promises to make a renewed covenant because the original one at Sinai had been broken by the people due to their idolatry and sin. This new covenant consists of taking the law of old and writing it on the people's hearts. At the Last Supper, Jesus fuses these two covenantal passages to show that in his blood, like what happened at Sinai, the new covenant, like what is mentioned in Jeremiah, is established. Jesus steps into the shoes of Moses by pouring out blood, but the divine irony is that it's his blood, not that of an animal. The new covenant is thereby established on a better mediator and on better blood. And then, anyway, they go on to say a little bit more about that. But then that's a great insight for understanding, okay, this is what Jesus is doing at the Lord's Supper. He's echoing something that happened way back in the book of Exodus. Now the other part here that's in a different color, poured out for you. The cross-reference here in the same color again is Isaiah 53:11 and 12. Especially verse 12 is what's in mind, where it is mentioned that the servant of the Lord, the Messiah, would pour out his soul unto death. So they're saying there's an allusion back from between this and that text in Isaiah 53. So that's how you can use this Bible, just by, tracing down the allusions and making the connections back to the Old Testament text. It's a lot of rich study there when you're preparing to teach Sunday school or preach a sermon. You can start making those connections. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you about this Bible that I think is just wonderful. Y'all know how much I love the continuity between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it's got indices. The first indices here is an Old Testament index. And so notice what it does. It will just walk you Genesis, Exodus, all the way through the Old Testament. And then take, like, Genesis 1:1. You need to compare that with John 1:1-3, 1 Corinthians 15:40, Colossians 1:18, 1 John 1:1. Now, some cross-references will do this in any Bible. But again, this one is set up specifically to highlight what the editors believed are Old Testament allusions in the New. So anyway, there's the Old Testament index. You can see it goes all the way through Malachi. And then there's a New Testament index that does the same thing. So Matthew 1:1 takes us back to Genesis 2:4. And the question would be, why? And you could dig in and find out by going to what it says here in Matthew in this particular Bible in the study notes. But I think I know what it is. You'll remember in Genesis you have those statements. These are the generations of. If you've taken my Old Testament survey course, you'll remember that. These are the generations of. Well, the Gospel of Matthew has that same kind of language at the beginning of the book of Matthew. And so it's like Matthew is picking up the story that was begun way back in the book of Genesis. It's a really neat allusion back to the book of Genesis. But anyway, you can use the New Testament index the same way. So let's just pick something. Let's say you were doing a study through the book of Romans. Okay, so here's Romans. And you went to the very first chapter of Romans. And so all of these are suggested allusions, not just cross-references, but allusions from Romans 1:1 back to the Old Testament text. For example, I already know what this one's going to be. The Jeremiah 1:5. If you remember in Romans 1:1, Paul says he'd been separated under the gospel. Well, this Jeremiah 1 text is where Jeremiah mentions, or the Lord mentions, that he had separated Jeremiah from his mother's womb. Oh, look, I can just keep doing this. But in 1:3, Romans 1:3, that's where Paul says that he was declared to be he's the seed of David according to the flesh. 2 Samuel 7, that's where you have the Davidic covenant established. So it's just a really neat study Bible. I'm enjoying using it. Reading right now, I've been reading through the book of Luke. But hopefully that will help you have a better understanding about how to use it. Oh yeah, and I'll just point this out. Like here's different. This is a different color font, obviously, than the green one up there. It's more of a grayish blue. When you see this, that is a direct quote from the Old Testament. Okay.